back to the modern-day players. Daniel Jones, 2 years ago, given a $160 million contract extension, and owner John Mara has doubled down on that as he enters year 6 with the G-Men coming off an ACL tear in a season where he played just 6 games with 2 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. During his career, just over 3% of his pass attempts have gone for TDs, ranking last out of the 34 quarterbacks who've thrown at least 1,000 passes since 2019. He ranks 30th among that group in yards per attempt, 29th in turnovers. Nonetheless, Mara says he's glad he gave him the money.
Yeah, listen, I'm still happy we gave him that contract because I thought he played really well for us in 22. Last year he got hurt, and let's be honest, when he was playing, we weren't blocking anybody. So let's give him a chance with a better offensive line and with some weapons around him to see what he can do. I was nervous about giving up too much to go and get a quarterback, but I was prepared to let him do that if that's what they wanted to do. We made a decision to stay with Daniel and add a weapon for him, and I think that's going to work out for us.
Well, I'm sure everyone hopes that it works out. Tim, that was very interesting. He has no guaranteed money after this season, as you know, so the team can move on from Daniel Jones. They can move on from their coach. They can move from their GM. Lots of things could happen. How do you see this playing out? Do you think he's the QB of the future there in New York?
I don't, Hannah. And the biggest reason is just availability. In his 5 seasons as a starter, two of his seasons have ended with him on the injured reserve. There's that saying, right? The best ability is availability. He's just been too often injured. And because of that, it's hard to count on him. It's hard to invest in him going forward. It's why, so many people, I think, were surprised at the deal that he signed. And then beyond that, he's only had 1 season where he's threw over 20 touchdowns. He's never thrown for more than 3,205 yards in a season. And listen, John Mara is absolutely correct. They did not do a great job of surrounding him with a good offensive line, with good skill position players. Mm-hmm. So it's been tough. But typically speaking, generally speaking, when you get a guy who's drafted at the top of the draft, he can make the guys around him a little bit better. Daniel Jones, I just don't think is that type of player. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. I don't think he's the guy of the future. They might be a little bit better around him this year than they were last year. But ultimately, I think they're looking for a new quarterback next draft, much like they were in this past draft.
Mm. Right. We all saw it on Hard Knocks, right? I agree with what you said, what John Mara said about the lack of talent. I think the offensive line especially has been so challenging for Daniel Jones to play behind. Last year in his, he only played a few games. He was pressured at really untenable rates. I remember in week 1 just thinking, oh my goodness, he's got no shot back there. That is all true. But what is also true is when we have seen other quarterbacks in this offense, and we saw both Tommy DeVito and Tyrod Taylor last year, it did look a little bit more explosive. I mean, Daniel Jones ranks near the bottom of the NFL the last 2 years in average depth of target. He just has not pushed the ball downfield. Taylor, in particular, you actually saw push the ball downfield a little bit. I'm not saying that the offense was that much greater than those with those players. It wasn't. But you would hope that your franchise quarterback, there's a big delta, right, in what you're seeing from the offense when he's out of the lineup, and that just wasn't the case. I think because of that, this season, even with the lack of guaranteed money next year, you have to really consider at some point making a change if Jones doesn't show more aggressiveness for fear of triggering that injury guarantee.
Yeah, that injury guarantee is huge. $23 million next year if Daniel Jones is injured this year and then can't pass a physical when the new league year starts in 2025. So not a guarantee for skill. That's not guaranteed. If Daniel Jones struggles this year, the Giants can move on if they need to next year. But this is a guy who has not only a torn ACL in his past, but significant neck issues as well, multiple neck injuries over the course of his pro career so far. So this could be a situation a lot like Derek Carr with the Saints or Russell Wilson last year with the Broncos, where you get to November, you get to early December, and the team decides we don't want to trigger those injury guarantees. We're going to bench this guy and move on. So already pressure on Daniel Jones heading into the season, this might be a more compressed time frame than it would be for other quarterbacks facing a make or break year.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, he's missed games due to injury in every season of his career since 2022. That's the year he went 9-6-1 as a starter and earned that bag. What do you make of the situation?
Yeah, well, first I would just say this. I think Dak has given us a master class in terms of, how to deal with playing through your contract. He's done it before in Dallas, and the way he answers the questions now about his contract, I think is absolutely perfect. And, whether something gets done or, does not, we don't know quite yet. But the way he's handled it, I think basically is helping him in the negotiations, because I think he's basically staring down Jerry Jones saying, yeah, I'm okay. I'd go play somewhere else if I'm completely a free agent. I'd make an absolute, boatload of money. And then I think also just from a fan perspective, the way his approach on it, no one wants to hear the starting quarterback complain about his contract or the money that he is or isn't making. So I think all of that, he's done an excellent job handling it. And I think he will play well like he has in the past under the pressure of a new deal that is potentially imminent.
Tim is absolutely right. And the fact that Dak has already done this before, bet on himself, accepted that risk, cashed in, is why he is in this position right now. I think what's difficult for Dallas here is, when they're negotiating with Dak Prescott right now, and I have no idea what the status of that actually is based on the quotes coming out, they don't have the normal leverage that most teams have, because they're not, the party that they're negotiating against is Dak hitting free agency. It's what he would make next year if he hit the open market. And I think we all agree that number will take everyone's breath away, because it happens so dang rarely. Even if it's only one or two buyers out there, we see how desperate teams are for quarterbacks. Last year, Dak played quarterback at a top 3 level in the regular season, even with his struggles in the playoffs. It's funny, we spend so much time arguing about that on here, but let me tell you, that will not matter when it comes to him hitting free agency, because of the desperation teams have at the position. So there's just no reason for Dak, frankly, to get a deal done right now. I would actually be surprised if he does.
Yeah, I mean, why not wait? That price is just going to go up. His options are going to become greater. CeeDee Lamb, he's not there either. He doesn't have a big a deal yet, so he's not practicing. He's not showing up, Bill. Where does this offense need to go from here?
Well, they need to get Dak and CeeDee Lamb back on the field together, because last year's offense, even with those two guys, struggled in the most important part of the field, and that's the red zone, where in 2022, the Cowboys were the most efficient red zone offense in football in terms of converting their possessions into touchdowns. Last year, it dropped to 14th. And we've talked about this a couple times on this show, I think, over the last few months. Cowboys have not spent a lot of money this offseason on replacements for the players who have left. Tyron Smith left this offseason. They cut Michael Gallup. The only guy they've brought in to replace Tony Pollard, their former starting running back, is the guy who preceded him, Ezekiel Elliott. So this is an offense that has to get better in the red zone to make Dak Prescott's life easier and take some of the pressure off of Jerry Jones if he doesn't get this deal done.
Boy, you got to really wonder about that running game. Let's go to the other side of the ball, too, because that's the other part of the equation. To the first 11 games of the season last year, the Cowboys had an elite defense. They allowed the lowest QBR and generating sacks at the second highest rate in all of the league. But then they really fell off those final 7 games, culminating in Dallas allowing 48 points to the Packers in that horrific wild card game for them. That's the most they've allowed in a playoff game in franchise history. Here's Micah Parsons on how they plan to turn it around.
It's going to be a very interesting year. As you guys can see, what I'm going to be doing is a whole bunch of stuff, dropping, flats, curls. I mean, it's really everything, and they're really just expanding my versatility, using me in ways that I should be used, and, moving me around, making them ID me and bringing pressures from other places, bringing me when they should bring me. But he's going to utilize every asset of my ability, and that's just, something I appreciate. But that was the point of the focus of, trying to be in better shape, trying to be better knowing what the standard and what he was going to have me do was. I really like it a lot, and it's going to be a really good year for me, I believe.
Love hearing that. He is also in line for a new contract, Mina. So good that he's thinking that way under new defensive coordinator Mike Zimmer. What do you think is the best way for them to use Parsons?
You know, I mean, not too dissimilarly from how he's been used, because he's been one of the most efficient and, deadly pass rushers in the NFL. I think versatility, when we talk about defensive linemen, edge rushers, it can mean a bunch of different things. I think sometimes we think about Micah Parsons because he was drafted, the thought was he was going to be an off-the-ball linebacker, became apparent very quickly he was the best edge rusher, not just on the team, but arguably in the league. That, to me, is a waste of his skill set. But there's other types of versatility. Something the Cowboys did a lot with him last year was line him up inside at multiple alignments on line of scrimmage in order to manipulate protections and create single teams for other Cowboys pass rushers. That, I think, should continue. He does rush the quarterback from many different spots, and that does increase the efficacy of an already extremely effective defensive line.
Yeah, he might be a great flat defender, but he's a lot more valuable rushing the quarterback, and he's even more important to the Cowboys this year than he's been in prior years because of the depth issues they have on that roster. Dorrance Armstrong, who had 16 sacks in the reserve role the last 2 years, left with Dan Quinn for Washington. Sam Williams, their second rounder from 2022, tore his ACL at the beginning of camp. Unfortunately, he's going to be out for the year. I know Mike Zimmer is great at manipulating protections. He loves those double A gap blitzes, double A gap pressures. But Micah Parsons is your best player, and you're more dependent on him than you were in years past. I would say every time he goes into coverage, it feels like a snap off for the opposing offense.
Yeah, I think the big issue here is just like in terms of the expectation for Dallas' defense is the number of takeaways they generated a year ago. Hard to do that year over year. That, to me, would be the area. They might be better on defense, but replicating the takeaways from a year ago seems to be tough.